I tend to really resonate with menopausal and postmenopausal women because it is a very juicy time of life. Weight gain is usually what brings them to the door, but it's all of the other aspects of wellness and well-being that actually gets them to walk through the door. And that is managing stress. That is managing stories that we're telling ourselves, old stories, old personas that are fixed in place. So I'm now able to look at it from lots of different perspectives to help women figure out just who they want to be and where they want to go.
Welcome to Making Change with Your Money, a podcast that highlights the stories and strategies of women who experienced a big life transition and overcame challenges as they redefined financial success for themselves. Now here's your host, Certified Financial Planner, Laura Rotter.
I am so excited to have as my guest today, Kristen Tomlinson. Kristen is a clinical nutritionist, a holistic coach, and a certified Big Leap coach, specializing in helping women transform their life and health through menopause and beyond. She has a 500-hour clinical nutrition certification and is trained in a variety of holistic and integral coaching styles. She herself has been practicing and teaching yoga for over 2 decades and is a wife, mom, and lifelong learner. So welcome, Kristen, to the Making Change with Your Money podcast.
Oh, thank you. It is a great pleasure to be here and have this conversation with you, Laura.
Really looking forward to it. I'm going to start like I always do, Kristen, which is, what was money like in your family growing up?
Money seemed and was, I would say, scarce. So growing up, I would say lower middle class in the 80s. We pretty much had what we needed, but there was still a sense of penny pinching and scraping by, nothing frivolous at all. We would wait for a birthday or Christmas to get some of those, special items that we may have wanted during other times of the year. But I always have a sense of, my father working very hard as a foreman at a plant, and my mom being stay at home until I was old enough, as the youngest of 4 kids, to get a part-time job for herself. But I would say we were raised with a sense of money is scarce and you need to penny pinch and not have anything frivolous.
And I'm curious, was that actually something your parents communicated verbally or through their actions?
That's a great question. It was both. Could definitely see it through their actions. Even my mom's fear of addressing money with my father, or seeing something in the store, no, that's too much. Or, don't tell your father if we bought something. Or so it was definitely communicated in all ways, I would say.
And what was that impact on you, especially in your younger years? Again, I often take this into whether or not you took it for granted you'd go to college, how you thought about paying for education, that kind of thing.
It's funny. As I was the only female, the youngest of, 3 brothers, of course, older. So I honestly felt that I was a kind of a trickle-down child. I remember my oldest brother going to college, my second brother going to community college, my third brother going to community college. And of me, it wasn't that I wasn't encouraged to go to school, but it wasn't expected of me. It was something that I had to look into. And I ended up leaving home at 18 and going into the music industry at 18. So I went into audio engineering, which was, as the black sheep of the family, I just kind of scurried away from all of that. But there was no expectation of me to go to college. It wasn't discouraged nor discouraged. It's just kind of, well, what do you want to do?
Such an interesting term, Kristen, trickle-down child. You couldn't get hand-me-downs from your brothers, right, in terms of clothing or You were not going to wear shoes, were there?
Not in terms of maybe a few small items of clothing because I was quite a bit of a tomboy, but some toys were trickled down. But what I mean by trickle down, it's like, they had to test everything. They were the oldest. They were the first three to go through anything and everything. So whatever was kind of left, that's why I kind of say trickle down, because it wasn't like our family could afford for all four children to go to a 4-year college. I don't think that was in the realm of possibility. So by the time it got to me, I just felt like, it's like, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to, it wasn't encouraged. So yeah, trickle down was the term that came to me in a lot of ways.
Interesting. It's an interesting term. So how did you end up entering the music industry at 18? What impacted that decision as opposed to, working at McDonald's or something?
Working at McDonald's was an option. In fact, I think I did that for a very, very short period of time. I felt different and always had. Small town, I had much more expansive views. And to my mom's credit, she did as well. She was kind of testing the whole new age philosophy in the 80s quietly. So my dad didn't know. He would not have supported that. But I got the good fortune of being around her when she was doing some of those things. And I just had an appreciation for kind of, doing what called to me. So I always loved music, always had. So I thought, all right, I'm going to try. I want to be in the music business. I'm going to go to audio engineering school. And I did. And it was probably one of the first big leaps I ever took in my life. And prior to that, it's kind of really quiet, don't rock the boat. But in the same time, I wanted to express myself, like new wave, punk rock, all of that was going on at the time. And I wanted to express it. So it was kind of like, yes, I want to do this, but don't look at me. I don't want to cause waves. So I was very much a don't rock the boat kid. And I thought that going somewhere like New York would help me expand in some way, be in the music business. How cool would that be?
So you didn't go to the West Coast. You relocated to New York.
Correct. Yep. Just
from where? Where's the small town that you grew up?
It's called Indiana, Pennsylvania. It's in western part of the state. I'd say the biggest claim to fame there is the university that's there, Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
So you did a certificate program, I'm assuming, and became an audio engineer and then got a job in New York?
I did. Indeed, I did. And it's so funny to look back. It's so long ago. Yeah, I did. I ended up getting my certificate. I ended up working for an audio rental company. So we would rent high-end audio equipment for studio use and for tours and live shows and all of that kind of stuff. So it was pretty cool. Mission accomplished. I met a lot of cool people, did a lot of cool things, and just burned out rapidly from it. It was definitely a small town girl fitting into city life. And thankfully, I didn't embrace things that I could have that would have been, some of the partying and, all of it was there, all of the drugs and the partying and all of that. But thankfully, I always had an angel on my shoulder where I tried to just, do the work and not get involved in some of the things you might imagine are part of the music business.
Right. Especially when you're in your 20s, which is, I'm assuming, how old you are in New York. So I hope there was a balance. I hope you weren't home by 6 every night.
Not at all. There were ample opportunities to have fun, and I certainly did that.
You said burnout. Actually, in a recent podcast interview, that term came up as well. So what did burnout mean to you? That you didn't enjoy the job, or that you were working, you did, but the hours were too long? What about it led to a sense of this isn't working for me?
It was stressful. So at a young age, I moved there when I was 18. By the time I was 19, I was helping to manage this company. So it was long hours. Well, I think they also trusted me because I wasn't from New York in a strange way. I got along well with the owners. They were great people. They kind of took me under their wing. It was, again, long hours. There were lots of deadlines, a lot of expensive studio time, having to get things to certain places by a certain time and organizing all of that. And also living in a city, honestly, I feel like I was in fight or flight all the time, just in terms of safety and getting here and there. Again, it was a major transition from a small town girl to this city life. And over time, I was there for about 7 years. By the end of that, literally, I was exhausted. I was burned out. I wanted to kind of land somewhere because I knew that being in the city the rest of my life wasn't something I wanted to do.
And what was the next step of your journey?
The next step was the opposite of the music business. I moved to beautiful Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where my brother lived. And just, I got an everyday kind of a job just to make money. Within a year, I met my then husband. And within a year after that, I was having my 2 kids. So I really settled down into kind of, I think, of what was expected of me, to be honest. So, remembering back of the models that I had growing up, it's kind of like very patriarchal. And that's exactly what I did. I essentially married a man who was exactly like my father and my brothers.
In what way in particular?
Middle class, strong, working man, I'll take care of you kind of a thing. It just felt good at that time to land and felt, quote, taken care of. And maybe at the time, it's what I needed. But it again was, to me, I almost feel like I just fell back to sleep.
I guess because I feel almost like 2 emotions as I listen to you, which is, as you look back, knowing where you are now, yes, it does feel like a step backwards, as you said, like going to sleep. Though, as you described the burnout and being in a culture, if you will, of New York City that wasn't who you were, I could almost hear a sigh when you're in your 20s of like, it's quieter. I have a relationship that's taking care of me. It's familiar. So in the moment, it sounds like moving forward to recognize what it was that you needed at the time. And, I'm sure that's part of your narrative, that it was what you needed at the time. It was right for you at that time.
It was. And I appreciate that reflection.
And so what changed? Because I know we hear how you look at it now. So what began to change, I guess, in you?
What began to change in me is there always was a stirring. And I think I went to New York to find something and I didn't quite find it. So I came back and I needed to land a little bit and it felt safe and sound in what I was supposed to do. But there was still this unrest and stirring. And it really started to become more pronounced after my daughter was born, my second child. And I needed something for me at that point because I knew that I was just going through the motions and I really felt numb. So the first thing that I discovered that I would say in my entire life that was just my own was yoga. So I developed an interest in yoga and I thought I'm going to go take this yoga class. They didn't even call it yoga. They called it stretching. It was in the basement of a church. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to go take this quote stretching class, but I knew it was yoga and I absolutely loved it. So I kept going. I knew there was more to it. So then I went and found another teacher who taught out of her private home and she was remarkable. So I went from kind of teacher to teacher. In fact, I found yoga before my daughter was born because that teacher, I just realized, came to her birth. I asked her to come to help me breathe. So I'd been practicing yoga for quite a while. But after my daughter, that unrest occurred. And I just continued to search for teachers and finally found what I would call the teacher of my heart. Began to do teacher trainings, began to do some exploration of myself, doing sadhanas, doing extended practices, deep meditations. I had come to realize what I had hidden my whole life was that I was gay and I had never faced it. In fact, I was able to suck it down so far I could almost deny its resistance, except my friend at the time who I was starting to confide in, I told her on my wedding day to him, I said, "Thank God I'm straight." She goes, "How many women get married and say to themselves, 'Thank God I'm straight'?" She goes, "Something's not right there." But that was quite a few years later. I came to that realization.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but so where were you? You described that this started to happen after the birth of your second child. How long were you married? How old were you? Just to situate the story?
Well, I was married to him for 11 years. We got a divorce when the kids were 6 and 9. So that was back in about 2005. I was in my mid 30s. It was like, when I came to the realization, it was a somewhat slow process, but when the realization hit, it was like a hammer blow. It was like, now what are you going to do? And so that just began a series of exploration where I have to say, if I can use the word universe, the universe just laid out the whole plan before me, because I said, if I'm going to do this, I need this, and that would show up. I need more information. I need to meet somebody, meaning someone I could talk to. So I just gradually started talking to more people. And as an introvert, that was very difficult for me to do, is confide in people. So just kind of step by step, I came into myself and embraced it. And at that point, I realized I would have to get a divorce. And with the caveat that, the marriage itself was fairly sleepy.
You've used that word many times.
This whole reawakening is true for me. I do see that there was this large part of my life where I was slowly waking up, and then I did wake up. And that's when, momentum started to build and things, I just started to expand my wings and grow.
Kirsten, could you describe the role that mindfulness practices, and I certainly include yoga in those, played in this evolution? I know that I've often talked about how discovering yoga and meditation woke me up to the ways I was sleepwalking and choosing to be a victim of my life. You mentioned briefly this term sadhana, but can you just, for our listeners, describe how you sense that it contributed to your life change?
Absolutely. The thing about yoga is that, as a practice, is that it really is a way to start to self-regulate, right? Regulate our nervous system so we can get out of fight or flight. We can start to actually observe and witness our feelings. And that can be done through, at first, the movement was everything to me. It really released physical tension, trauma, and stress from my body, so that I could start to recognize, well, I'm feeling some things here, and it's really okay to feel it. It's okay to feel sad or angry or confused. So removing some of the physical tension at first helped me. And then working with a very skilled teacher, deeper practices where it was much more targeted breathing practices, some intense practices through visualizations, meditations, mantras, and extended practices. I had the ability to go to like a week-long intensive sadhana. It's a deep practice where we studied a deity. We would do visualizations and mantras. I believe it was Chinnamasta sadhana. Chinnamasta is a goddess, and we would do some practices based around visualization and breathing, physical movement. And the aim there is really to just come into yourself. And that I did. And the community was helpful in that I felt like for the first time in my life, there was a safe space to communicate. And so I would, clearly there was a couple of practitioners who were out, and you just knew this about their lives. So I felt safe enough to say, can we go have tea one afternoon? And then I expressed what I was feeling. And there was power in that, because then I realized the cat's out of the bag. Now I have to do something about it. So yoga opened my body. It opened my mind. It gave me safety in my own body, as well as a community to start to move with, get support from, and then find my way.
That's really a beautiful description. And it's not always obvious to people where yoga is listed with other, I could go for a run, I could do a strength training, I could practice yoga. And it's interesting that there's something unique of the linking breath with movement, of perhaps more silence than we're used to, that creates a space for this self-exploration to take place.
Any yoga is good yoga, but there is also how far do you want to go with it? And that is a choice you can make with yoga. There's many deeper practices.
Yes. And there's also, many different teachers. I also was lucky enough to find the right yoga teacher who I might have shared with you when I first walked into the class was like, oh, this is so not going to be for me. Like I need to sweat and, it's not moving quickly enough for me. My heart rate isn't, getting up there and she and the class has really changed my life. So quite aware. So then what was the next step? You said you're in your mid 30s with a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old and no longer involved in a sleepy marriage. And what came next?
Well, next is I chose to move out. Actually, I think it was on Easter Sunday. So I rented a small apartment because my ex-husband kind of lived in his family home. So I didn't want to, it was such a process. I felt so unworthy of anything going through that because I felt I'm doing this to them, to him. And it took me a long time and a lot of therapy to unwind that knot and realize that in a lot of ways, there was a number of reasons things weren't working in my life. And I just took all ownership of everything because I didn't feel worthy of what was happening to me. There was some shame involved in it. So I thought, well, I'm going to go find an apartment. So I found a great place with bedrooms for the kids. And then we started the process of, 50-50 custody. I got a job at an old place I used to work because it felt familiar. And I felt like I really, what can I possibly do? I was just lower than low, but also in having had the support of a great teacher. She told me once, when things are falling apart, sometimes all you can do is keep taking the bricks away, get to the bottom. I was at the bottom, but I also felt guided in some way. Like this is your path. This is what you're supposed to do. And it's what kept me going because there were days I was just on the ground sobbing for days. So it was a process of rebuilding.
I certainly am interested in exploring how you felt supported by the universe. And before we go there, we started this conversation with you sharing scarce financial resources you grew up with. How did you navigate this transition financially, Kristen? It sounds like you were in a marriage where your husband was the sole breadwinner. So how did you make it work?
He was the sole breadwinner. I worked to a certain extent for the family business. When the kids were old enough to go to a preschool, I had a part-time job. So I did have some money. However, having my relationship with money was so wrapped up with how I saw my parents experience money. And that was the man pretty much had the money and the woman was support staff, so to speak. So I was still in that support staff position. But I did have part-time work. So untangling money was very difficult. I did have a settlement. I had limited alimony because, again, there was a lot of shame involved and I didn't step into probably what I could have. And I also didn't want to put the kids through it. So I had some settlement. I had this apartment. I had about a 3/4 time job. And honestly, for a time, I thought, this is going to be as good as it gets. Like, what could I possibly do? What do I have to offer the world? And I was also teaching probably 8 yoga classes a week at that point. So it was a lot. You can't, yoga is a labor of love in all regards. It's, you have to teach a lot of classes to make a living at it or own a studio, but it was a passion and it was something I was not willing to give up because it was when I was teaching yoga or taking yoga, I forgot everything. I just was able to drop down into myself and be completely centered and happy. So I found teaching and taking classes a respite from my unsettled mind. And at any rate, that was a part-time work. So I pieced work together, but I wanted more. And I knew I needed more of let's say a larger career. So that started me on a wellness journey. And the first thing was I went to massage school. So I did that for a short period of time. Loved it, but wasn't quite for me. So that started me on the journey of nutrition and coaching. So I've just been loving learning about more and more about wellness and well-being. And because I was able to pull myself through that, I felt that I had something to offer.
First of all, I just love that sense of empowerment that you just had in that last sentence, that you started to see the value and recognize and appreciate the value of who you are, and therefore what you bring to the teaching, whatever teaching you choose to do. And I'd love to explore what you mentioned just a couple of moments ago, Kristen, of feeling somehow supported or even co-creating with the universe. Can you describe in what ways you felt that?
There was always help along the way. And one of which was even before, on the cusp of my realization and knowing that I needed to leave the marriage, I've just been so blessed with a number of phenomenal yoga teachers in my life. And one in particular was also a nutritionist. So I knew that I was unhappy and didn't feel good. So I'm thinking, well, I probably need to eat better because I think I'm having some blood sugar issues. So I went and had a visit with her, and she was actually the first person I had said to that I think I might be bisexual, so I could approach it that way. But I realized that, we're such holistic beings. I thought it was food. I wanted to go to feel better. But then over time I said, can I talk to you about something else? And she was very open to that. So that's when it started a journey. It was food. It was my well-being. It was expressing myself. It was learning that I have a voice in a relationship. So it was a nutritionist and coach and yoga teacher who taught me that. And I thought, gosh, I would love to be like her one day. Lo and behold, here it is. But she was one of the first steps. That led me to a very great skilled therapist that I worked with for quite a while. It led me to a women's group that I was part of and also started to help facilitating. It led me to a couple of light relationships when I first left the marriage. And then eventually it led me to my current wife. So I just constantly asked of the universe, if this is to be, I need the next thing to show up. So I'm also very passionate about manifestation. And that whole process really was guided because I can't do this. I need help. And then the next thing would show up. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, what I love that I'm hearing is that, yes, there's a sense that you're being supported and guided by the universe, and that also includes relationships with people. It's not different from, it's intertwined, that you're being led to meet people who resonate with you and who help you along, and of course who you even marry, which is really beautiful because you're a self-described introvert, and yet it's so obvious how important people are, I think to all of us, but certainly to you, in helping you feel seen, which I think also translates into helping you see yourself for who you are and what you have to contribute.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of it. We really do attract those that are going to best reflect back what we need to see and challenge us and, take us to those learning edges and just feeling safe to explore. And this nutritionist and coach was just mind blowing to me. And talking about money, I'm like, how is she doing it? I'm like, she has this job that she absolutely loves. She's phenomenal. And how does she make it work? It's like, I want to be that and do that.
So can you share with us where you are now, what it is, who you work with, the kind of work that you do, and how you make it work? And, I'm going to tell you the one thing I see is you're not living in Midtown Manhattan, So I would assume where you live, the cost of living helps you make it work. I mean, that's only a piece of it, but I would assume that's part of it. I was just reflecting where you're living and how that's cheaper than other places you might have chosen to live, but that's not the question. The question is, what now do you provide? Who do you provide it to?
So, one thing always leads to the next. Yoga led to the massage led to more of a desire to do coaching nutrition courses, and working with clients in nutrition led me to realize, oh, food is really going to intersect with emotions and things going on in your life and stress, which led me to realize I need to expand coaching into not just nutrition, but how do I handle all of these other things people bump up against? Which then led back to, well, I need a more expanded view of nutrition, which took me to my clinical nutrition certification. As someone who prefers kind of integrative and holistic health, I was seeing a natural functional medicine physician. Her name is Dr. Wendy Warner. And after I graduated from that course, I reached out to her and I said, hey, I have this certification. Any interested in it? And we had a really great conversation. And so she invited me to be a practitioner at her office. I want to say that was it's got to be 8 years ago. And now I'm a wellness coach for her. So I do wellness visits for her. So that's basically some new patient onboarding. I get some nice nutrition referrals through her and elsewhere. So I was started that part-time while I was also working as a wellness coach at a local gym here. And I loved that, but again, wasn't quite enough to support myself. So becoming a practitioner with Wendy really helped me see my value. So my wife is a 4th grade teacher. So we always had her income as a baseline, thank goodness, as well as insurance and benefits and all of those items, so that I was able to really explore the job that I'm at now. So now since 2018, I've had my own business and doing my own coaching and continuing to work for Dr. Warner, as well as seeing my own clients and running workshops and, hopefully making a difference in people's lives through my genius. And also as a big league coach through the Hendricks Foundation has been my next life-changing endeavor that I've been going through.
So I was going to ask what wellness coach is, because that sounds like such a broad category. But now, of course, you've also piqued my interest into what's a big leap coach. So maybe you can address one at a time.
Everything, we cannot separate any part of ourselves out from the other. So food to me is a way in, and then we're going to bump up against all of our issues around food. And well, why can't we make steps towards the goals that we want? What comes up for you? So hitting against that more and more, I wanted to do more. And I'd read a book called The Big Leap. I think it came out in about 2008 by Gay Hendricks. It's been around a long time. Him and his wife, Kathleen, are really phenomenal human potential psychologists. And they have many, many, many books. But I would always go back to The Big Leap. Like once a year, I would read it and like, there's something here. So then I ended up going online. Must have been right around COVID, because previously they would do in-person trainings. And then I found they were doing virtual trainings. So I did their trainings and then realized, wow, I want to do this coaching process. So I did the coaching process, became a Big Leap coach, and now I'm support staff for their calls, which is another way I get to continue to bask in their teachings and presence. But a Big Leap coach really is, for me, the part that was really missing, because it's how I've learned to incorporate practices that can really help myself as well as others start to make those changes that they would continually bump up against. One of those is for me was learning what my zone of genius was. And it kind of is what I'm doing. It took me a while to get here, but I realized this is what I'm meant to do, which is basically it serves myself and it serves others. And that's kind of how we know we're in our genius. And it's just beautiful upward spiral that just continues. Instead of getting complacent, it's continuously learning and growing in this upward spiral as I see it. So that's kind of the way I kind of visualize being in your zone of genius, as Gay Hendricks calls it.
So as a Big Leap coach, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. You're helping, it sounds like you're helping others make a big leap. So is that specifically for people who have a vision of where they want to be and you're helping them achieve it? That's what a coach does.
Well, exactly. Big leap coach, that just means that I'm certified in their processes. And there's many.
I see.
So what that does is when I'm working with clients, it enables me to help them address some of the obstacles they come up against. And like I said, usually food is the first place that we start. I tend to really resonate with menopausal and postmenopausal women because it is a very juicy time of life. Weight gain is usually what brings them to the door, but it's all of the other aspects of wellness and well-being that actually gets them to walk through the door. And that is managing stress. That is managing stories that we're telling ourselves, old stories, old personas that are fixed in place. So I'm now able to look at it from lots of different perspectives to help women figure out just who they want to be and where they want to go. It starts with food because I'm passionate about that, but it leads to many places. So that to me is kind of wellness.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And I think when we spoke previously, it's coming to mind how food can be similar to money, right? People come to me about, am I taking enough risk in my investments? Will I have enough money to retire? But there's so much behind that in terms of money stories we grow up with and what we've convinced ourselves. I'm good with money. I'm bad with money. And so there's so much more to address than just the numbers. The numbers, I often feel, are sort of the scaffolding one needs to understand, right? You need to know how much somebody weighs and how often they do or don't exercise and what they're eating. But then you use that to actually understand the person and the life and what it is they're really coming to you for. So yeah, I feel like food is a fascinating topic.
And I love how you equate it with money. It's the same premise. Money, I intersect with self-worth and value with money too. That was something that I needed to work through. And just valuing my time and seeing money as it's an important energetic exchange. It really is. And there's, there is the monetary value, but really I see it as give and receive. It's an energy exchange.
I'm smiling because I'm also thinking, right. And it's a money exchange, right? If we just hoard our money, then we're not supporting other businesses and we're not supporting, money is meant to be used as a medium of exchange. We could just try to exchange our goods and services, but then somebody who needs your service, you might not need their goods. And so money is that form of exchange, and it's meant to circulate in the economy and not only stay in a bank account and save for a rainy day. So we've learned a lot about your journey, and I'm curious, as we come to the end of our conversation, as you've grown and changed, how has your definition of success shifted? And perhaps also financial success, but success broadly as well.
Success to me, the way that I understand it now, is doing what you love that fulfills you. And at the same time, it is of service to another human or the world at large. That to me is success. And from that stems abundance. I have a coach, of course, I need a coach as well. And she pointed out to me that a while ago that I would look at money first. Money was, when you have your own business and you've got the ebb and the flow, when the downshift happens, it's kind of like, I'm in that downward shift. Now I got to do something. So then it becomes in a way putting money first, chasing the money, pay the bills, do this, do that. And when I actually reverse that and start to think of it as, how can I serve more? What can I do to be in my genius? That's my focus. The money follows that. So it is the passion, it is the service, and the abundance follows. And that to me is that whole genius spiral. It all works together. And when one part starts to limp, I think the other part gets a little bit wonky. So, even that's part of wellness to me, is keeping all of these things in a beautiful flow so that there's less, wobble. And wobbles are going to happen, but if you got the tools to manage the wobbles, awesome.
And that leads me to another question that came up as you're speaking, which is, what are the tools that you personally use to deal with the inevitable wobbles?
Breath work, meditation, those are givens for me. They are priorities on a daily basis. I'm learning better communication in my relationships, and especially with my wife. That flow is very important. And doing the work myself. So it's very easy to kind of watch practices and then just say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I get it. But to actually stop and say, no, I'm going to actually do this practice because I'm feeling something here. I need to face this. So I'm going to sit with it and do a practice. So I would say, a little bit of walking the talk and allowing myself to be coached and to keep learning.
I love that message, Kirsten, too. I love that you're coached. I love that you're a lifelong learner. If somebody listening to this feels like, I really need this woman's help, how can they get more information about you? I'll, of course, put your website in the show notes.
Yeah, that's the best place to find out. CoachKristen9.com. Whatever workshops I have or I'm up to, it's on there, and they can certainly reach out. And I love to just talk to people. So I'm always happy to have a chat and do a little discovery call and to just hear more about somebody's story. If it's a match, great. If it's not, we had a great conversation.
It's wonderful. And you have a YouTube channel? Is that true?
Yes. A colleague of mine, my friend and colleague, Julia, we on a whim, we both love to cook. We both love our banter and exchange. We've known each other for a very long time. She's been through a lot of my journey with me, actually. We decided to start a YouTube channel. We both love to cook. We're both coaches. So we created the Coach's Wellbeing Kitchen, where we just share some of the recipes we like. They're all healthy and delicious. And then we offer some fun banter on coaching topics. It's a lot. It's just so much fun.
Right. It sounds like you guys just have a good time doing it. And anybody who watches can get some good ideas, both for recipes and for life. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's really an important story for others to hear. And you just have such a wonderful vibe. So I encourage anyone who's interested to reach out. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Kristen Tomlinson, Holistic Health Coach. And some of my takeaways are, when you begin to follow the stirrings of your heart, the universe will support you. Kristen felt an unrest and a stirring after the birth of her daughter. She felt like she was numb, just going through the motions. She found yoga and began to do some self-exploration, and realized that she had hidden from herself her whole life that she was gay. Once she embraced that fact, the universe, according to Kristen, just laid out the whole plan before her. My second takeaway: when going through a big life transition, find a space created by a community or a teacher where you feel safe to explore. Kristen described finding yoga, a practice that helped her learn to self-regulate, and finding a gifted teacher and community to help her express what she was feeling, rather than pushing away emotions of sadness, anger, and confusion. And finally, know that one thing always leads to the next. So just start where you are. Kristen studied and became a yoga teacher, teaching about 8 classes a week at one point. She then began a wellness journey, which led her to massage school, which she loved, but didn't feel quite right for her. That started her on the journey of nutrition and coaching, which led to her clinical nutrition certification, as she realized that food so often intersects with emotions and stress. Kristen recently became a big leap coach, incorporating new practices to help herself as well as others. Are you enjoying this podcast? Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss next week's episode. And if you love the show, a rating and a review will help others just like you to find it, and I would so greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Making Change with Your Money. Certified financial planner Laura Rotter specializes in helping people just like you organize, clarify, and invest their money in order to support a life of purpose and meaning. Go to www.TrueAbundanceAdvisors.com/workbook for a free resource to help you on your journey. Disclaimer, please remember that the information shared by this podcast does not constitute accounting, legal, tax, investment, or financial advice. It's for information purposes only. You should seek appropriate professional advice for your specific information.